Sorry, again, I pressed something and stopped. Um, so I'll try to keep this, pick up where I left off. It was John the 22nd who establishes the papacy in Avignon, also a brilliant canon lawyer. In all of his conflicts between John um, does go eventually in 1328. He invades Rome and sets up, declares John the 22nd deposed, sets up a new pope. That not very many people followed, but some people did. There was a conflict. There was for a little while, and it's a real mess. Lewis is calling for John's, and it's an extended conflict, as you can see, calling for John's removal. Um, John supposedly spent two-thirds of his income on mercenaries, on soldiers to fight Lewis. It is a military battle, it is an intellectual battle, and it doesn't really end in any clear victory. Eventually, what happens is Lewis had set up shop in northern Italy. The North Italian cities got pretty disgusted with his um, let's say, overlordship, and they start rebelling then against Lewis, and they make up with John. John, and for the Lewis has to go back north of the Alps, which he does in 1330, and never really goes back to Rome anymore. But he then defeats Frederick of Austria, and he continues being emperor. Now, some of the background to some of this conflict too, though, gets pretty nasty because one of the things that John the 22nd did early on was take stock of the church. He said, we have a problem here. One problem is these Franciscans. The Franciscans claim that they are the most perfect followers of Christ. Francis was, if you know anything about the Middle Ages and the religious history of the Middle Ages, St. Francis is usually one of the most attractive figures. He did not become Pope. Peter Moroni did, but Francis started the tradition that Peter Moroni came out of. And Francis was a truly spiritual man, too. All kinds of stories about Francis I could tell. Um, but his whole point was to imitate Christ literally, to be naked and poor, following the naked and poor Christ. And the Franciscans followed in that way. They viewed themselves as the most perfect form of Christian life because we are the ones who are actually imitating Christ. Now, John said, what a bunch of hooey. They're not, first of all, they're not poor. They claim they're poor, but they're not poor. They have property. No, the Franciscans' argument was we do not own property. We simply use it. The church owns all of our property. We are just using it. It's called the usus fructus. We still have those kinds of legal arrangements. For example, if you were, elderly, you could, will to IUPUI all of your worldly goods, your whole estate, and they would happily and gladly accept that, and they would grant you the use until your death of your own property. So it's not no longer would be your property; it'd be IUPUI's property, but you would have the right to use it until you died. That's the usus fructus. And that's what the Franciscans claimed was was the arrangement with the church. But John said that's ridiculous. So what I'm going to do, you people, you hypocrites, I'm going to give you your property back. I'm not going to, sit here and allow this to take place. And he also realized if the Franciscan life is the most perfect form of Christian life, he's not a Franciscan. What does that mean for him? He's the Pope. So what? These Franciscans are more perfect Christians than I am? No way. Therefore, he condemns the phrase that Christ and the apostles owned no property. John said, you know what? Look, what happens when Jesus and his apostles, they go and, they pick corn on a Sunday because they're hungry and it not only breaks the Sabbath, they just take the corn. When Jesus is getting ready to go into Jerusalem, he tells the apostles, go, find a donkey there, an ass, donkey, ass. Just, take it and bring it here. And if someone says, what are you doing? He says, well, the master needs it. And John says, either he owned those things or he stole those things. For John's point, Christ owned everything. He is Lord of all. You can't say that he doesn't own anything. He has dominion over everything. And in Latin, dominium is the word for ownership. Dominium. So Franciscans are stuck. They're starting to freak out. They don't know what to do. And this is the real conflict. And the